Okay, so public service announcement here. Up until this point, we've been trying a more formalized start to the podcast, and we wanted to try something a little bit more casual. So we're going to try that for today. I hope you like it. Thanks for listening. Okay, then, everybody. Hello, Connor.
Hello.
Welcome. Good
Hello.
to see you. It's a sunny day. I'm feeling pretty good. I don't know how you're feeling.
I'm feeling good. I'm in the chair again, ready to rack my brains and talk all things TTRPG, man.
I'm excited. I'm very, very excited. We've been putting some cool topics in the chat recently, and I'm excited for to brew some of these up. See what we've got. Now, today we're going to be discussing, as mentioned in the intro, we're going to be discussing our Inn-tro, which is one I'm very happy with myself.
Oh my gosh.
INN-TRO, very, very happy with that. And just talking about the beginnings of a campaign. One kind of thing I wanted to define early on is the difference between a one-shot and the first episode of a campaign, because I think they hit very different points.
Mm-hmm.
A one-shot is usually a standalone, maybe 2-episode situation. Often, in our experience, it comes out of more goofy sort of characters. You can do serious one-shots too, but usually it's like a particular theme, like you want to do a vampire one-shot or a pirate one-shot. We're not going to be discussing one-shots in loads of detail today. It might crop up. We're going to be talking more about how to lay the scene for a campaign that you want to begin, which isn't the easiest thing.
No, it's not. I think each segments of the story have their own troubles, the beginning, the middle, and the end. And the beginning definitely comes with its own set of problems, I find. What would you say are the most kind of glaring problems that you come across when doing like a first? Because I know the ones in my mind, but I'd be interested to see what you find the most glaring. Like the challenges, I guess, that you would find.
So I think the biggest challenge for me is taking your campaign from an idea, maybe a story briefing you've given your players, to okay guys, we're actually living this now, we're playing this now. And actually the hardest part of that for me is provoking your players into meaningful RP. Because the role play is difficult when people don't know each other's characters, when people are unfamiliar with their own backstories and their place in the world. People are quite tentative. Often people are trying out accents as well. We have a bit of a rule, don't we, of the sort of the first episode, there will be at least 3 accents tried. You opt for about 5 accents attempted.
Yeah, I go for more sometimes, man. I can push up there. I can get real high.
And it has to be done. You've got to try these things out, because what you don't want to do is be stuck with an accent that you're uncomfortable with,
or any type of character,
and any type of character part you're uncomfortable with. So a first episode is very much the place to try these things out. But it can be difficult. What do you find difficult about that?
So my first things, the first thoughts I have when someone says to me, "Oh, we're going to do an intro. I want you to do an intro to the campaign." So it's getting the all of the player characters to meld into a group, because the problem is a lot of people make a lot of different characters from a lot of different backgrounds, and they can all have different beliefs and values and morals, and it's your job as a DM to try and gather this gaggle of geese together into a kind of singular goal. So I find a lot of my kind of intro stuff is, like you said, allowing players to go from that 2-dimensional idea into their 3-dimensional actuality, and then also trying to guide them into a let's all be friends. Let's not kill each other because we don't like each other's, motives and stuff. Let's all be friends and we're all going to go on this adventure together. I think that's the thing that maybe I find most intimidating about that first episode. Because especially if you've got some people who like to play very interesting characters for kind of maybe a bit more edgy, like to push against the grain type of thing. You know that you've got to reach, let's say you're at a table of 4, kind of a standard average table, that you've got to reach each of those individually, and you've got to hook them well enough that you're going to gather this team onto the adventure with you.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head, to be honest, because I think that is the part that has the potential to be the least narratively least narratively satisfying and the most railroady.
Yes.
And by railroading, we mean where the DM has made a prescribed story that there's basically no deviation from. And I think it's really hard to go, like you say, you're a separate group, you're separate people with separate motivations, but actually, psych, you're all part of the same team. This is what you're doing. You're all going to be friends now. That is really genuinely difficult. And I think with a good group you're familiar with, the players know that that's a part that has to happen. And they'll do things like ask the character in the corner with the giant greatsword, why are you here today? And they will do a bit of that for you. If you've got an unfamiliar group, particularly with people that haven't met before, people might not realize that and kind of have an expectation on the DM to magic up a friendship.
Or they might be a bit uncomfortable if they've not played with these people. You might feel a bit insecure. Like, there's lots of different stuff people are bringing to the table. Like, you know, you might just feel a bit uncomfortable doing RP or stuff like that. And navigating those as a DM as well can be quite challenging and interesting.
Absolutely. And that is a challenge. I like you say, it is a challenge. And I am personal, I know you're a believer of this as well, is that you shouldn't avoid challenge.
Hell no.
In your life, you shouldn't avoid challenge in your hobbies, and with D&D, you should definitely not avoid it, because it can be the most satisfying bit. And yeah, provoking your group to take an active role in the episode is a challenge. But I think there's some ways you can do it. There's 100%. Some ways you can do it. And this kind of brings me on to my incredible pun that I will mention again, the Inn-tro, because the Inn is the classic D&D starting place.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people talk about it being the classic place without discussing why it's the classic location and why it kind of suits a lot of things. Mm-hmm. It's not perfect, but there's a lot of reasons why people like inns.
Yeah.
Now, we had a campaign that started in an inn, which was campaign 2 started in an inn.
Gosh, it did, didn't it?
It did, yeah. And we do an interesting thing where we have session zeros individually.
I was about to talk about this.
We have like a character backstory one shot for every character, which means you have tried an accent out. You have an NPC usually that you've encountered before. You've been to your home planet or you've been to your hometown. You've had some experiences that have allowed a bit of character development already by the time the campaign starts. We took that and started in an inn, and it was a really interesting situation, and I'd quite like to talk to you about why you chose an inn.
Oh, Sam, you're making me go back years and years in the memory banks here. I'll be impressed if I could. So I'll talk a little bit first about these one shots. These kind of I like to call them one shots, the session 0 one shots, and they're a tool for both player and DM. And I want to make that really clear, and I would encourage everybody to do them because I just find they're so interesting, because they're a moment where you get to work with a player where it's just one-on-one. Like you said, they can try out all the accents they want to try out. They can try out their NPCs, their character, the world, and it instills them in the world a little bit themselves so that they have an emotional tie to the place that they're in, that you know, they're attached to this world already. And then it also gives the DM a chance to investigate the character that the player is playing. So this is what your character likes to make decisions on. This is how I can hook you. This is how I can bring you forward, because your character moves in these circles and they're pulled by these kind of things. The inn is I think why you use an inn is because an inn is a classic place where you can meet various diverse and interesting people. It is a place where you can travel along the road and you'll come across an inn. People on missions will be there. People who just live in the town will be there. People who are hunters on a break will come to the pub and have a pint. Minstrels travelling through will come to the inn. It's a place where so many diverse characters can be. So that's why it's such easy pickings, I think, for that first session.
I think you're absolutely right. And you have those the unique places where you go, oh, the kooky wizard gnome with the big floppy hat is sat on the bar stool. The bar stool is kind of hiked up so he can just about get his nose over the bar. And there's loads of little bits and things you can say with that. You can have the kind of Aragorn style guy smoking a pipe with his hood up in the corner.
I've had hundreds of those.
That's the staple.
Yeah, it's a staple. I've been hundreds of those as well, to be honest. So I'm not pointing any fingers here.
I think, to be honest, if you were to take a survey of every person that's ever played like a fantasy ranger, I think everybody would say the reason I wanted to play the fantasy ranger was when I saw Aragorn in the Prancing Pony smoking a pipe in the dark. I think everybody would say that. And there's so much room to put little characters in and have people meet together. Now, what I really liked about the start of campaign 2, where I was playing my desert wizard, who was a diviner, he was a
we talked a little bit about him in the last episode as well.
We did, we did. What was the he was like a diviner sort of wizard guy.
Yeah.
And he had a prophecy of this knight of silver and this knight of gold and coming together and this whole thing. And this brings me to a really interesting topic, I think, which is prophecies, which you can start a prophecy in the first episode, and I've done that as well now. And it's a really interesting experience because I've had mixed experiences with prophecies in D&D. I've had mixed experiences. I personally loved being the character that found them out. Is really cool. Like, you are the person that had the vision. The vision tells you this. You've searched the sacred text. You found this prophecy. That's super fun. From a player perspective, I think prophecies are awesome. I think from a DM perspective, I find them scary because there's nothing worse in a campaign than, or it's creatively peeving, I think, when you have an idea and you've said something in a previous episode and then you've forgotten about one detail of it, and then one of your players goes, yeah, but wasn't it that? And I think with a prophecy, because they are so written in stone, your characters wrote out what it said. Mm-hmm. I think you can trip yourself up as a DM with prophecies. I've definitely found that myself.
Yeah, I get you. I really do. Prophecies are really interesting. I've done quite a couple of them because of prophecy being such an archetype in fantasy that I just love them. You know, I love getting involved. And there is such a payoff to a prophecy. If you can get it all to line up, so good. But the way you do it is you make it vague. Like, for example, the one that Siren got, was he saw a knight of gold and silver. And in a pub, he had the same vision, and he saw the two other characters that were playing. One was not gold, and one was definitely not silver. But by the time he reached the middle campaign, they had become the knights of gold and silver. And all I had to do was give one character gold armor, one character silver armor. Boom, I've done my prophecy. But you can build upon things as well. Like with prophecy, it doesn't have to be right all the time. And vagueness in the prophecy is what helps. Have a couple of words that you can make happen, which are actually tied to story points that are really kind of cemented in stone. The ones that you're pretty confident that you're going to be able to get the players through. Tie them to that. Bish, bash, bash. And also, as you said, some players will remember these things. Some players will not. So actually, a lot of prophecies that I can do sometimes, players just forget about. And then I go, it didn't come to pass. And they've just forgotten about it. So it never existed. Like, don't be worried about that. Because it shows that the player wasn't that interested in doing the prophecy motif anyway. So that, once again, like we talked about, letting the hooks go, kill your darlings, let it disappear. If the character is going, well, actually, my prophecy said this. You have two options. You can either go, you're right, it did say that. In that case, it's like this. And then you reward that player by going, you kept that, well done, good job. I'm actually going to bow to your knowledge, and it is so, kind of thing. I make it so. Or you go, it's still coming up, it still could happen, kind of thing. And you do it that way, I think. But prophecies are, especially in writing, prophecies are very overdone. I think George R. R. Martin came with the Game of Thrones to dispel that sense of prophecy. That's why Game of Thrones is all about subverting that kind of, they're going to be the person that leads us to the thing, and then it always gets subverted. Because from the Tolkien era, prophecies were so prolific. Young boy or hobbit must take this one in a lifetime journey to thing. A hero of 1,000 faces kind of thing as well. It's all that hero's journey, prophecy team.
I'm glad we got to talk about that, because I've definitely found prophecies interesting. And if you are a DM and you want to try a prophecy, vaguer the better.
Make it vague. Put it in early. Make it vague.
Really good one you did, which I loved, which is a recurring vision. So in campaign 2, I was the guardian. I had this guardian flame. The guardian flame is this whole like white wizard sort of
very
situation.
Much so.
We talked about it in previous episodes, but the main bad guy called Zagar was like the anti-wizard, and he was the greatest prodigy of magic ever. He had an even more powerful flame given to him by like the primordial of magic, and it was all that high fantasy.
Oh, that high fantasy goodness. Yeah.
But I had this recurring vision of Zagar stood over me as I died. And that was recurring. And I had always interpreted it, I think, how you wanted me to interpret it, which was him standing over my body because he's killed me.
Mm-hmm.
And actually the way it went is when you took a flame, all of the previous bearers of the flames came back as ghosts, like force ghosts sort of thing. So I got that vision confirmed in the last episode, where I died at the end of the campaign as I sort of ascended. Mm-hmm. As I took the fell flame, the green one, and my purple flame, too much power for a mortal, started to ascend. And Zagar's ghost appeared above my body. And I always thought it was such good DMing, because it was like the confirmation of the prophecy, but subverted it. It was not the way I thought it was. And that was so juicy. And I remember at the time going, that was so satisfying. As a player, that was like, okay, full loop. We've tied the rope into a bow. Loop complete. Amazing. And that really worked. It really worked.
In all transparency as well, my memory of it's not amazing, but what probably was happening is I was just trying to put the scare in you. So I had that, he's going to kill you. And then at the end, I saw the opportunity. You picked up the flame and I was like, I put 2 and 2 together. The ghost would be there. This is a perfect way to complete that image. Like, I was probably worried about it all the way up to that point, going like, I need to finish this. I need to find a way. And then it happened, and I was going, here it is. Here's the moment. It completes it. Yeah, have faith in those type of things, and you'll find those little ways of completing them or touching them or finding, also with prophecy, if you have like a kind of motif that matches. So in that one, you were dead on the floor, but actually when you saw him, you were dying, but the motive is still the same. Do you know what I mean? There's still the motif of death. So play with that. You can kind of stretch it and bend it a little bit, but you can make it happen. Don't be afraid of doing them, because they can be super rewarding for you and your player.
And what we've just been talking about is how to close the loop, which is important to know. In the context of a first episode, you need to sow the seeds. You need to start the thread and sow the seed. Try some things.
Yes.
Try some things. And like you were saying, some of it won't come to pass, and that's okay. Some of it, they'll go, that is the coolest thing ever, and they'll run with it from literally the first episode till the end. And that will be so satisfying. Now, one thing I think we were talking kind of about the DM sort of story elements of a first episode. And I think in like we were saying, Inn is a good place to introduce NPCs. It's a good place to get players to talk around a table. You can have the only seat in the house is one table where one of the PCs is already sat, and you have to sit there. Nice. And it's that whole you have the one edgelord character who's like,
I'll sit at the bar.
I'll stand at the bar.
Yeah, okay, I like that.
And that begins the whole thing, and that's really fun. Now, I started Cyberpunk Campaign 2 in a church.
Yes.
Which was a similar situation. But everyone knew they had to go to this church of this god in this city. So everyone turned up. And we had a similar situation of people meeting in the pews. But it was a much calmer environment. And it was a different vibe, despite the fact, more or less, if you think about it nuts and bolts, it was a lot of chairs, in a large open public space, which is what an inn is as well.
Yeah.
But the vibe felt different because people were more sacrosanct. People were much more quiet, and lots of characters were having, my character looks at the lectern and considers their past. My character rifles through the book and sees what marries between this faith and my own. One guy, my character is not religious, but he sits and in respect of people anyway. There was a lot of that, and the vibe was very different, despite the fact, as I say, nuts and bolts, more or less the same as an inn.
Yeah. I also think what really good about that was you gave one character, a very skilled character, a friend of ours called Harry, the chance to be the torchbearer for the first episode. So this could be a really interesting archetype to talk about. We were all there. We all had our reasons of being in this church, but you gave... Solomon was his character. It was a prophecy, was it not? Or a vision. So we were all sat kind of sacrosanct, and then he kind of barged into the church and was this kind of like rallying call because he had this vision, and we were all like, well, this must be the person we're here to see because he's the only person acting differently. So then we all gravitated to that person like a torch, which I thought was really clever because you got us all in there quiet, boom, all drawn to it, and then once we were all drawn, we knew we were together, and you shot us off into the story.
Yeah, I was not going to lie, but I was happy with that. That was how I wanted it to go.
Humble as ever.
It did come off. And but it's about knowing your players.
Yes, it is.
Because I think I could have done that with any of you, but I think the easiest person to have a bombastic, big, like, come here, all of you, is Harry. He was going to nail it. And I knew his character already was this cantankerous wizard.
I was going to ask whether the character also played a part as well as the player.
Massively.
Yeah.
Massively. And it's really interesting because I'd gone from just playing a pretty paragon-y, like, I'm a lawful good wizard myself, to his, which was very much, if you were to use the D&D sort of alignment archetypes, he sat more on the neutral scale. He'd probably be lawful neutral, I think.
Yes, I actually...
He was very like, we need to get things done.
The greater good.
Do it. Exactly that. And that was quite interesting for me to go, my character would have dealt with this situation totally differently. Mechanically, we're both wizards. But we would have gone about this different ways. I thought it was really cool.
Shows you perspective, I guess. Within an archetype like a wizard, it shows you how many different types of wizard there are, how much variability people will bring to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, what we've been discussing so far is what I've seen referred to in the kind of D&D YouTube sphere as cold start.
Oh, right.
Where it's RP-ish, it's kind of, it's a slower pace and it's more story based, but you can do the hot start. Which I was talking to my little brother about this, my little brother Ned, and he's pretty keyed in on these things. And he was saying there's a Latin term for this called in media res.
Yeah.
Apologies, Ned, if I've mispronounced that. But more or less, it's the idea of starting a story in the midst of the plot. And you can do a hot start. Now, if you want to, start your players in combat. It would be wild. It would be really wild. It would be really wild. But if you want to go for a hot start, or it doesn't, maybe not even the combat, maybe they're sat around the table already, but bandits barge in and punch the body, like the bouncer of the inn, down, and he falls over, knocked out, and start it like that in that situation could be quite cool.
Would you say that the beginning of campaign 3 was a medias res hot start? I mean, we were on the boat and then that thing happened. We could talk about that maybe, but first, before we talk about that, which is an interesting beginning, that's probably the beginning I'm most proud of, we'll talk about the starting in the combat thing, because that was really interesting, and my immediate thought was, do not do that with new players. I was like, do not do that with new players, because
probably not.
Combat is, as I'm learning more about D&D, I'm realizing it's actually quite a complex game. There's so many moving facets and numbers and dice and abilities and racial features. So I wonder that starting something in combat would be, okay, so make your attacks. Go. Which could be good. And also maybe it's about knowing who you're playing with. If you're playing with a bunch of dice rolling dungeon crawlers who just want to get through it and cut down enemies and pull loot from chests and have a whale of a time, that might be perfect because you're going, well, actually, let's start right in it. I'm not going to give you a chance to breathe, and we're just going to go. And I'm going to see what your characters are like in that intensity, and then we'll let your characters relax, and I'll see where they go from there. Yeah, I mean, would there be any other forms of it than just starting in combat, or would it be maybe starting in an RP sense that it is really heated, maybe like a political?
That's why literally was as soon as you said that, my brain went to, you're all in shackles. And the king's called you into the throne room and you're all brought in shackles would be crazy. We had to tell you what, speaking of interesting starts, we did an evil campaign ages ago, and we started in shackles.
Yes,
chained up in a prison, and that was the beginning of the campaign. Was we're all chained up, and that was really cool because immediately there's a problem to solve.
Yes,
straight away. It's kind of like a puzzle start, isn't it?
Yeah,
where it's a hot puzzle.
Yeah,
where you've got to go. Well, you guys going to sit there for half an hour RPing in shackles, or are you going to try and get out?
Yeah, and also I think that maybe that there is a good thing for first episodes, because giving a problem to solve straight away united the team instantly. We were all brothers in bondage, and we had to break out. So it didn't matter who the other people were. We were going to break out together. Even though we were playing evil campaign, everyone was a bit nefarious. We have to get out. We have to break out. So instantly, everybody aligned to one task, and it just began. Campaign 3 start. Let's have a chat about that. So we've talked a little bit about campaign 3 before. I wish we had better names for them now that we're talking about them on a podcast. It's just like, which one's this one? Number 2, number 3. What was that one?
We could go Roman numerals with I.
Campaign I. Yeah, so campaign I. I had, through these session zeros, which we've talked about in this episode, I had laid the groundwork, everybody through their stories, which were all various and all around the place, different characters, different people. Got a coin to board a ship to the new land. We were going off. It was the new world, and everyone was going to go explore it. And I thought, how brilliant. Because once again, it traps the people on the same vessel. They have no choice but to be around each other. And they're all on the same goal. They're all going to this new island. And as we're about to get there, the red star appears. We've talked about it in the episodes. The kind of breadcrumbing appears. And a meteor falls out the sky, smashes the ship in two, and a fight ensues there and then. And then through this, all the kind of NPCs that were not player characters miraculously lost at sea. Oh no, where did they go? Oh, smashed to pieces. And you guys, like Elden Ring or some of the Dark Souls games, they have a boss that you actually can't beat at the start. It's to set the tone, to emotional promise, which I'll talk about in a moment. And then I had that castaway. Everybody washes up, so you all have the same goal: survive. So maybe it is actually the first episode in the campaign is about uniting the characters into a singular goal.
It was the perfect start. Honestly, it was so good.
So much fun.
The ship was perfect because you're right. There was nowhere to go except be on the ship. There was immediately a fight, which was a fight we couldn't win. It was that same thing. It was like literally, I fired a crossbow bolt at him. I rolled really high. I rolled really high, and it rolled like an 18 on dice. Added all my stuff. It was good, and it just bounced off. Nothing. And then he starts setting the ship on fire. Everyone's going ah. It was so good, and then we were all washed up on the new lands on the same beach, and then you really are united, aren't you? Because that's mutual trauma, isn't it? Shared trauma. Which, like you were saying about the brothers in bondage idea, that forged, that friendship and bond forged in the crucible of battle is a classic way of doing it. Which maybe that's why combat's necessary. Maybe we've answered our own question.
Maybe we have answered the question here.
Maybe we've answered our own question, or at least. Maybe not. Maybe it's just you need. Oh, what's the word I'm looking for?
Is this the question of is the first combat necessary? Is that the question we're talking about?
We're sort of touching on it.
Yeah, we are touching on it.
Is it just you need the first tension? Is it just a tension? Because you could do an RP episode where the threat is the king's gonna
chop your heads off. Off with their
heads. That would be a big threat, and there's no fight. It's just you talking to the king and his advisors and kind of wheedling your way out of that one. Maybe that's a necessary ingredient.
To be honest, I think it hits on another point that I've got here, which is hitting your beats. So making sure your pace of your first episode is. And I think if you're not having combat in your episode, moments of high tension are really important. You've got to think of it as a roller coaster. If you spend too much time at the top, your players will get tired and drawn out because there's so much tension that they haven't had time to breathe. And if you lay them down on the bottom too long, then they're going to become bored. So I think if you're not having combat, bring the tension up. The king's about to chop off the head, and then he changes his mind, and we come back down a bit. And then maybe they've got an extra day to work up the defense, but then he gets back, and something bad is revealed again, and the king's really pissed, and then they're gonna chop off the head, and then it comes back down. And just keeping it in that kind of pace, that nice pace of bringing up high tension and then lower tension, which I think is quite a hard skill to have. And if new DMs are out there and they're like, I don't know what you guys are talking about, the pacing, that's really difficult, don't worry. I think that's probably the latest lesson I learned, was how to process pacing and do that well, and read my characters' energies and stuff and make that. But pacing is really good.
I think pacing is really important, and I think it's, like you were saying, it's a really important and difficult narrative tool for DMs. Now, Matt Colville has a really interesting way of doing this. He was saying that when one of his friends didn't want to play D&D in that one shot, but they wanted to see how he DM'd, and he was like, "Oh, well, you can just play some of the monsters, and you can sit behind my DM screen."
Right.
And he was talking about this as a DM, where he was talking about basically he had a threat level to basically decide in a combat, this is talking about, but you could do it for other things, of basically the threat level. So there's D6. Level 1 is like they're under literally no threat at all. They're having a conversation over a glass of milk. 6 is life or death, and the threat the DM's putting them under. And basically Matt would change the dice to basically give a scale for the person he was DMing with at that time, which co-DMing is a very rare thing, but DMing in that situation of going, okay, now we're going to turn up the heat. It's a 4. Turn up the heat. Okay, we're going to keep going. It's a 5. Okay, now we're going to go to a 2. Now, if for you don't have to have a dice, you could think about it yourself and go, where are we at in terms of pacing? We're at about a 2 right now. We've been at about 2 for probably about the last 25 minutes. Maybe we could just lick this up a little bit. Maybe a letter appears summoning the party to a lord's mansion through the spooky woods. They're going through the spooky woods. Oh, it's spooky. Oh, they fight some goblins. Oh, it's threat level 4 and 5. Okay, they defeat them. And at the end, they get to the Duke. He gives them a feast. And the Duke says, cool, guys, I've got a quest for you. You're going to go and slay this dragon. Blah.
Yeah.
And that you can tie in your little... Your pacings in with that. Now, what were you saying? You had what was that phrase you were saying about emotional
promise? Emotional promise.
Please explain this to me, because I really like this. I really like this term, and I want you to hear.
I also really like this term, and I use it for loads of stuff. I use it for my writing, and I use it for D&D. So the emotional promise is exactly as it says. The emotional promise. Frodo gets the ring. How he defeats the ring is he must bring it to Mount Doom. You know exactly where the story is going. You're going to be with Frodo as he carries the ring to Mount Doom. That's your promise. That's the promise of where the story is going to go. So it's good to set up in a first episode the promise of what your players are going to experience. Sometimes you can do this even as far back as, really, you should be doing it in a kind of brief to your players. This is the type of campaign I'm going to run. This is the type of story I would like to explore. This is the kind of themes and stuff. And then going into that session 0, you can explore it a little bit more. Though I would keep your session 0 to explore that character and make that connection as a DM and player. And then session 1, you can start bringing in your emotional promise. So if we use campaign 3 again as an example, you're on this great boat, you're going off to the new land. That is a promise in itself. That is the promise and call to adventure. You are going to somewhere unexplored before, and you are going to get to explore this new and fresh, vibrant land. The comet crashing into the ship and turning into a giant obsidian monster that is almost unkillable is the promise that we're going to play epic fantasy. If you're experiencing this level of giant monster in the first episode, it's because that is what it's going to continue like as we go through. We're going to play a kind of giant monster fighting RP, and you're cementing that in their brains and minds. You're promising to them this is the things that are going to be coming in the future. And then you can dial it back down again. Because I think your first episode, you really do want to make an impact as well. You want to say, bam, this is what we're going to do. This is it. And then you can dial it down. But that emotional promise is nice. It's just a way of telling your players or promising to your players, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to be experiencing. These are the kind of highs and lows as we go forward.
I like that. And I like how you're talking about that your first episode is almost a microcosm of the campaign, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
That you say the emotional promise of going, this is what we're going to be doing with ourselves. This is the situation. Like, if you're doing a pirate campaign and your first episode doesn't involve a ship or grog or sword fighting and plank walking, you maybe missed a trick. Unless your pirate campaign is exactly, because I thought that was what we were doing. I thought that was the pirate campaign idea. Now you might, as a DM, have a really cool creative way of doing this, where you're in a pirate. It's a pirate campaign, but you guys are actually like honored sailors who are hunting down pirates, and you're all lawful people, and that's your situation. But then, and this is where I like to think with the first episode.
Sam, they're coming for you.
Sirens.
Watch out.
Is that you should brief your players on what you're going to be doing. What's your campaign brief?
Yeah.
Now, we've been talking about this recently with what we're going to do with our next campaigns. Is ours are very different to what we've done before. We've done heroic fantasy, very much fantasy
for a long time.
For 3 campaigns.
Yeah.
You're switching to a more sci-fi-ish situation.
Yes.
I've done sci-fi, and I'm switching to a political fantasy, Game of Thronesy sort of vibe. And in my one, I'm not going to tell you what the first episode is going to be. I have no idea what it will be.
Oh, go on!
But if it doesn't feature heavy-duty RP,
of course,
and large-scale political movements, I've probably missed a trick. So I think it's hard to say there's a one-size-fits-all first episode.
Because there isn't.
But I think you should consider threat, pacing. If you can, it's that's the hardest thing. Is pacing.
I think so.
And sow some seeds, because you reap what you sow, and if you don't sow, you won't reap.
Amen.
So you need to take in what you put down, and that could be a prophecy, that could be a magic item that appears and then disappears somewhere. It could be an NPC they meet who they really like, who mysteriously vanishes, and then later down the line, they kind of you see him again, and you see him walking around, and you're kind of, oh, was that? And then they're gone in the market, and then again that happens.
Bit of mystery, that is
exactly.
Mystery.
And then they're standing at the window, and they make lock eyes with you, and then the curtains close, and they're gone. You could do loads of little spooky things like that. But I think sowing some seeds, reaping what you sow, and put some threat in there. Was there anything else you would? Yeah, anything you would add to that mixture?
No, man, I think you actually quantified that quite well. I'll just have a little rack of the old brain. Yeah, and also get your emotional promise in there. Yes, I think that's the one. And try and... I think we'll talk about this next episode, where we talk about GM preparation and kind of preparations that we make as we go into an episode. But hitting your beats kind of ties into that by getting the beats that you want to make sure are in that episode, that first episode, especially in that first episode. Because remember, you're going to have to be touching every single character in that first episode. Yes. Some episodes you go, it's really spotlight on one person, or it goes spotlight on 3 people, or sometimes you might have everybody's going to be involved in all these story arcs, maybe a BBEG type story arc. But that first episode, you are going to have to make sure you are engaging every single person, because they don't have their own things to play on yet. So you've got to give them all their toys. Make sure you're giving out plenty of toys. Like you said, you've got to get loads of toys out there for everybody to play. And watch what people are playing with. Watch what excites people. And then you start your DM prep, and you start Okay, cool. Yeah, those are the 5 that were picked up. Amazing. I'm going to start now writing something more for those, planning something out. Oh, someone picked up the prophecy. Brilliant. I'm going to now start planning on what my prophecy could look like as we go on into the future, and so forth and so forth. Yeah.
Well, so far as like you're saying, we've been talking about these first episodes from a DM perspective, which is important because you have to write it. But I think also it's key to talk about this in terms of players, which is as a player, pick the toys up.
Yes.
Go. Oh wow, there's that knight NPC who wants to duel people in the square. I'm gonna go and duel him. And I don't care if I lose my first combat. If my first combat is a sword fight with a cool swordsman, and then we become friends, that's cool. Or if you see one of your PCs, another PC, and they're maybe having a moment of prayer, but they come out of their moment of prayer and they're sat there, have a conversation with them. You know, what God do you worship? It's interesting you sit by a tree and not within a church. Have conversations with people, play with things, try things out, and experiment with accents. Don't be stuck with one because that's the first sentence you said.
Yes.
What I always find is with a character's accent, and you might not play with accents. I know
you might not.
Some groups don't, but just for those that are, I always find I have one good sentence in that accent, and then I have for every 3 very, very bad ones. And often what happens is I have the sentence prepared, and I say it, and it sounds great, and I'm like, oh, this is solid. Okay, this is solid. This is rock solid. And then somebody asks me a question that I wasn't prepared for, and I do a bit of in the moment role play.
Yeah.
Like improvise, and the accent just falls to pieces.
Yeah.
And you just try things out and just be aware of that. You're really good at saying to people, I will be experimenting with my accent today.
Yes.
Just so you know. And then everybody knows that when you wander from a slightly American accent to
I'm awful at it, that's why.
It wanders around, but like everyone knows that's what you're doing, and then you settle on one. Like you tried a few little things with Toshi in my Cyberpunk campaign, but then you settled on that Southern drawl,
which
sounds
amazing.
so good.
So
I really love it. I
So
really love it. It's great.
Yeah, I mean Ezekiel, who is my other one I'm playing in a friend called Owen's campaign. He started off Irish, morphed to like a strangely Russian, and now he's like prim upper English, and I've settled on that apparently now. So really don't be afraid to play. Yeah. And if you're with the right people, you're around the right table, they may jab. I definitely got some jabs of he changes every week, but you're like, I'm just finding it. Like I am just playing. Don't worry about playing with it. Finding what feels right. Because some people don't like accents. I know some people find the commitment of an accent a lot, because obviously if you do it the first episode and you do it for half a year, you're going to have to do it for the whole thing, which I actually disagree with. I think you can stop at any time if you just say to your team, I'm really tired of doing this, can I just go back to my normal talking voice? And unless they're very horrible, they will say, yeah, of course you can. But you'll find that, like, I actually find it's a really fun way. Like, I've learned how to do so many accents through playing D&D, and it's really fun. I love messing with my voice and trying stuff out. I think that's why, Critical Role they were all voice actors before they played D&D, but having that voice acting stuff is so interesting because you can jump. A voice helps you jump into the skin of a character sometimes. I find it helps you put on their clothes almost and become them, because they just speak differently. They have different mannerisms.
Works for NPCs too.
Yes,
exactly the same for NPCs. If you have like a classic accent for that NPC, it's really easy to fall into that role. So the classic one I always think of that really gets me in the zone is I have like a demon accent.
Okay.
I have like a demon way of talking, which is I've used for Abaddon, who's like this big demon princey sort of guy.
Not anymore. We got him.
You killed him. Yeah, you got him.
Victory!
But I found it so easy to fall into his character because he was this it was this sleazy, but quite prim and powerful accent, which I really enjoyed doing, and it made it so easy for me to fall into the character because I know where I'm at. And that's key because it's important to find yourself in that role, particularly as a DM. You play all the NPCs.
Yes.
Now that's if you're role playing. As I say, some people don't like doing that. That's okay. We are very much from the RP school. There's nothing virtuous about that, but we're talking about it in terms of our own experience, which we do NPCs. We like the role play. We like the acting. We liked the funny like there was one guy who was, what was he called? Pete the Sewer Pirate in your
Oh my gosh.
was just a pirate who we found in the sewers, and he was Pete the Sewer Pirate, and he was absolutely hysterically funny and had like the most classic pirate West Country accent.
Yeah.
But we found him covered in fecal matter in a sewer.
Do you know what pains me? Do you know what pains me about D&D sometimes is you make these intricate, incredible characters, and your players don't care. But you make one stinky sewer pirate, and they're like, "This guy, we're gonna keep him safe at all costs. We're gonna lead him to the end." It's a running theme, I think, through so many people's games. Because I think what actually that boils down to is it's different. A character that's an NPC that's not taking themselves seriously, or not thinking, they go, "Oh, what a breath of fresh air." Everyone we talk to is either a big bad guy that's like, "I will destroy you," or "Oh, come into my inn." When you've got those standout characters, they go, "Oh, someone fresh, exciting, and different and weird. Let's keep that around because he can be our jester / like fool that we wheel out to do a West Country accent." Or sorry, I don't bloody know.
Yeah. Oh, it was so good. But no, you're absolutely right. Like, people remember those characters. I think it always comes down to this, and I've spoken to you about this before, is as a DM, one of the coolest moments feels like it should be the bad guy monologue.
Mm-hmm.
But the monologue always gets cut short when the characters go, "Screw you, you suck, you're gonna die," and then you built up this whole thing, and your characters go, "You're going down," and that's end of thing. Whereas the goofier characters, often they have more extended, because people go, "Who is this guy?
Tell me more about you.
I want to know more about this man." And then they explore it, and you go, "How did you become a sewer pirate? Like, where's your? Do you have a ship? Like, and it invokes this whole thing." And that was also what was cool about him, was it was in a really horrible place. I think we'd returned to Amon, this city, and it was like under enemy occupation by some like really horrible, weird
totalitarian. Oh no, how would you say that?
Totalitarian
dictatorship. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really awful.
Pretty tough.
Really, it was really awful, and
it was a comic relief. It's a comic relief.
It's
the comic relief archetype. You feel your players are like, "Oh god, this is awful. We're climbing around in poop in the sewers trying to lead a rebellion, and they're all miserable." And and you go, "Okay, it's a little breath of fresh air. Just forget about that for a while. Have some fun with this person, and then we'll get back to the hard side." That's pacing again.
Pacing,
riding.
Pacing.
It's riding the beats and going. My players need, and nothing more. Something that pointed that really out was campaign 3, and maybe we'll even do. Maybe we should save it and do an episode about how we approach pacing, because we're definitely not perfect. I've had times in campaign 3, my most recent campaign, where I've actually really messed up with the pacing. I'd love to talk about that and tell people how I rectified that and stuff as well. But player-wise as well, first episode, I know we were off on a tangent enjoying ourselves, but first episode player-wise, note some stuff down. I've been doing it in my other campaign as well. Notes down stuff that you want to talk to the other characters about as well. So now, as I'm playing, as I'm a bit of a newer player than I am a DM, when something happens, maybe something, or a bit of character standoffy, we have a bit of thing, I write down, approach that character in future episode for a bit of RP, and I list my emotions at the time, so that you can store them up. Because DMs do this thing where they go, "Well, we're walking now. We've got 2 weeks of walking. What you want to do?" And as a DM, it makes my heart fall a little bit when everyone goes, "Oh no, I'm fine. We can just go. We can just travel." I'm like, "No, come on. Surely you want to talk to your friends. You want something like that." And it makes me a bit crestfallen. So I'm now in that mode of getting those little bits, because they're the most juicy bits when you actually sit down with another player and you start interacting character to character and forming bonds. Because then, let's say you get into combat and someone gets hurt, those bonds are tried and tested, and everyone starts to have a little bit more weight. So definitely take a few notes. I know I'm not a note taker. There's a lot of people that don't take notes. That's totally chill. But come up with your backstory. Slowly reveal some stuff in that first episode. Listen to your DM and see what DM is laying for you hook-wise. Choose your favourite hooks and make it very clear to the DM, that is what I'm interested in doing, by really showing your DM that your player is actively engaging with that. And if they're not doing that because they want to hide how much they want to do that, approach your DM after the session and be like, I really liked that hook. Can we explore that more as we go through the campaign? And your DM will be like, yes, we will do that.
DMs love that.
We love it.
About what you like. I have definitely built up a tool I really like personally as a DM, which is I do like basically check-ins, don't I? As I go, right, guys, can you tell me 3 things you like, 3 things you want more of? And then my whole party tell me that, and I go, cool, okay, I'm going to take that bit. Okay, 3 of my 4 people said this thing, so we're going to definitely make sure that's happening next episode and, you know, in the future. One thing I thought really interesting you just saying, and it's aside from the first episode, but I just find it so interesting. So when you take notes, you're taking notes like what your character's like thinking and feeling at that time. Is that your notes?
So
mine's completely different to that.
Okay, I'll walk you through mine, then you give me yours. So let's say my friend Owen's campaign, I had done something very unfair to one of the characters. I had mistrusted them. I'd snuck into their mind during a spell and had a little look around, and I was caught. Much guilt, much embarrassment. And I wrote down on the thing, at some point Ezekiel's guilt will get too much that he will have to apologize. When he does this is up to you. Like, I don't say that, but this is what I'm kind of saying to myself. And I just have a little note of that, of like, talk to this person about this. And then I can, from that sentence, recall what happened, how my character Ezekiel was feeling, and then how they would approach it in that time, basically. That's how I would do it.
That's amazing. That's such an actor's way of approaching it, isn't it? I love that. That's
really?
Really interesting. Yeah, and I know you've done.
I've done my time. I've done my time on the stage.
Yeah, so mine is completely different, and I approach mine from my background, which is more sciences and psychology, which is I take notes of things that have happened and lore things.
Wow.
So my notes are Solex the Sun Reaver, Sword of the Fire Primordial. Those are my notes.
Incredible.
They're just like it's like a Wikipedia page of just, this is the things that happened. This is the cool sword that appeared. This is the king. This is Aton Shak.
Yeah.
Master of Magni's legions. I'll write that down because I think it's really cool and I want to remember him. That is or like a prophecy. I'll write that down.
Mm-hmm.
I never take notes on how my character feels about something.
Interesting.
Ever. It's really interesting.
I want to say as well, really you all better pray that you have a player like Sam in your campaigns, because of all that note taking. As a DM, I don't even have to rely on just my own knowledge. Sam will come correct every time. I'll be like, oh, whoa, what's this? And Sam will go flick, 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 flick. It's this thing. And I'm like, thank you very much, Sam. And then we just continue on. It's beautiful. It's a lovely symbiotic relationship we've built up over the years.
It's good. Yeah. It's a really interesting thing, I think, is about note taking. I think that's really interesting. Definitely something I think we could touch on in a different episode.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, I think it's a good place for us to round up. And I think we kind of need to do 2 roundups. We did a bit of a roundup already of DM side, but we'll do player side, but we'll do them both. Yeah. So DM side, you want to make sure there's a kind of variance in pacing, have some threat involved. It doesn't have to be a combat, but have some threat. Have some opportunity for role play. Maybe have a way in which you can provoke that role play. And often have a place, a location at which people can, this will take place, I think. Is there anything you want to add to that?
And try and bind their goals into one. Try that. Yes. I think, to get that nice solidified, bind their goals into one trajectory by making a threat. It could actually involve the threat or something like that. Try and find a unique and interesting way to get them all on that same page.
Exactly. Council of Elrond style.
Exactly so.
You're all joining up. You're all part of the fellowship. Yep. Goodbye.
Who will take this torch? Who will take this thing? Come on. Yeah.
Now, player side, pick up the toys, play with them,
the toys.
Try things out. Not everything you do in the first episode has to be what your character is like forever. You can try things out and go, that didn't sit right. Don't like that. Gonna leave that. Or I love that so much, even though it was a minor thing I did. That is now a major thing of my character. Love that. Explore, try things out. And the main thing we haven't even talked about yet, but I'm just going to say it to everybody, DM player, have fun.
Yes.
That's what it's about.
That is what it's about. Is that another episode done?
And I think that is it. Thank you very, very much for listening, everybody.
Yeah,
Colin,
thank
you for your time. Great time.
It's great to be here. Great to be here as always. And I hope you guys found something interesting that we talked about today. It's great. We love it. We love chatting.
Brilliant. And if you enjoyed this today, join us next week where we're going to discuss DM's like preparation and inspiration.
Amazing.
Brilliant stuff.
Excited for that one.